Well, the ceasefire right now is a bit tenuous. It's unclear exactly if it's going to hold and what will happen this coming weekend and on Saturday when another batch of hostages were expected to have been released. What's happened in recent days, primarily since President Donald Trump issued an ultimatum to Hamas saying that he has had enough with the drip and the drab, as he called it, with only getting one, two, three, four hostages at each release. He wants, or he demanded, that by Saturday at noon, all of the hostages that remain in Gaza, which is about 76 or so, unclear how many of those remain alive. Israel has confirmed that already about 35, 36 are dead. So we're looking at about 40, give or take, who are believed to still be alive, that they all be released by Saturday at noon.
As far as I'm concerned, if all of the hostages aren't returned by Saturday at 12 o'clock, I think it's an appropriate time. I would say cancel it and all bets are off and let hell break out. I'd say they ought to be returned by 12 o'clock on Saturday, and if they're not returned, all of them, not in drips and drabs, not 2 and 1 and 3 and 4 and 2. Saturday at 12 o'clock, and after that, I would say all hell is going to break out.
Hamas has, of course, said that it will not do so. And Israel has been also a bit unclear with what its demands are. On the one hand, it is obliged, or it has agreed to this first stage of the deal that was supposed to see the release of 33 hostages. And during that time, it was agreed already that only a few hostages would be released every single week. And in exchange, Israel would release also every week a certain number of Palestinian prisoners and would also over time gradually withdraw its forces from certain parts of the Gaza Strip who remained. If Israel now has said that it will, on the one hand, it wants all the hostages from the first stage to come back, so that's the living ones, about 9, but it has also said it wants what Trump has demanded, all the hostages. So what exactly happens on Saturday? Does Hamas give all the 9? Does Hamas give everyone the 40 that are alive, or does Hamas just give none? And then, or give just the 3 that it was supposed to release? No one really knows where this is headed at the moment. Israel has said, and Prime Minister Netanyahu made this very clear, that if the hostages are not released on Saturday, although unclear if he means all of them or just those who were supposed to be released this Saturday or all of the remaining living hostages in stage 1 of this hostage deal. But whatever it is, if none are released on Saturday, Israel, he said, will resume the fighting in an intense way. Hamas is preparing for that, and Israel is also preparing. Israel has begun calling up reserves. It has begun mobilizing its forces who have been in a withdrawal movement away from Gaza under the current agreement, but now might be moving back into Gaza in a bigger way. I think that what Hamas needs to remember here, and for that reason, it's also preparing its forces, and there are those reports of that it's told people shut off your phones. That would make it more difficult for the fighters and the commanders to be tracked by Israeli intelligence and to potentially be eliminated. But what's happening, and I think that Hamas needs to focus and understand, is that if Israel does resume fighting, it will look different than the way it looked until now. We have yet to see fighting between Israel and Hamas under the administration of Donald Trump. The last 15, 16 months of this war, when there was the intense fighting, all took place when Joe Biden was president. And as we know, Joe Biden withheld certain arms shipments to Israel, the 2,000-pound bomb in particular. That has all been released since Donald Trump took office on January 20th. So Israel is replenishing its stockpiles. It is getting back those weapons that it was not able to get its hands on. That's number one. It also, as we can hear from Donald Trump himself, when he spoke in the Oval Office and said that if the hostages are not released by Saturday, all hell will break loose. This is his way of basically saying, and if you're Israel, you understand this, that you now, as Israel, have my cover, my diplomatic cover, and my political support to renew the fighting. This is different than if Biden were to be in office. And the second thing I would just also recommend to Hamas to keep in mind, Israelis are very upset. They're very angry. Israelis are obviously hurting and deeply disturbed by those images of the hostages who came out last Saturday, or Eli and Ohad, the three men, emaciated, frail, gaunt. These were images that we thought we had left behind as a Jewish people after the Holocaust, that evoked memories of survivors leaving concentration and death camps that the Nazis had created. And to see that once again in 2025, when there is a state, an independent sovereign state of Israel, and Israel is not able to prevent that from happening, is created great anger and upset within Israel. Now, that could be translated, if the fighting does resume, into a more aggressive approach by the Israeli government and the Israeli military, especially now that it does have the political support of the US administration. So Hamas will be gambling and thinking that Israel won't do everything because we'll still hold on to hostages and we'll hold leverage over Israel. And they will. They'll be able to put pressure on Israel by making it seem that the Israeli operation is endangering the hostages. But I think that Israel, because of how angry it is with the situation, with the way the hostages have been treated, with the fact that Hamas is still in control, is putting on these festivals and rallies and showing we're still here, Israel's response will be fierce and very aggressive. The other element to this whole situation that's going on is how it will play out politically for the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. On the one hand, Netanyahu is trying to walk a very delicate balancing act between standing with Donald Trump and making it clear that he supports what the president has said, and therefore he wants to make it seem that he's also being very tough. But he also has political pressure from home within his own coalition. When he agreed to the first stage of the ceasefire, one of the parties, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir, had pulled out of the government, making his coalition smaller. And then the other party, led by Bezalel Smotrich, another very right-wing party, has said that if the deal continues and there is not a resumption of fighting, they will also potentially pull out of the government. So while this raises the prospect of his government falling, and therefore he might be inclined to go back to fighting. On the other hand, 70% of Israelis, including 55% of his own voters, support continuing the release of hostages. So Netanyahu knows all this, and it's complicated, right? You won't be able to kick the can down the road forever. And at some point, he's going to have to make a decision. Do I say, okay, even at the risk of my coalition, I am not going to resume fighting. I'm going to do everything I can to get back the hostages. Or am I going to resume fighting, put the hostages that remain in Gaza in peril, because we know that their lives are definitely in danger every minute, every hour, every day they remain in Gaza. But I have no choice because I have to keep the coalition, even though I might pay a price from the public in a future election. So obviously there is the substance and there's the question of really what's right and wrong from a strategic national security interest. But we can't ignore that we are dealing with politicians, and politics is always going to be a part of it.